Hey the YouTube, is Gundid73 making another episode of Knife Talk, and today I'm going to be doing a request for N8M knife. And he sort of had two requests. One was, they're both rust related, and one was like, rust resistance in terms of steel, and then rust prevention as a term of maintenance. So this video will be on the first one, rust resistance in terms of steel. Now I have a few knives out here and they all have stainless steel. Now, stainless steel, as defined, is basically 13% chromium or more. So, it's like some knives, like say D2, if I remember right, D2 has 12% chromium. So that's why people call it semi-stainless, because it's right on, the cusp of being considered stainless. And then you have some like S30V here. S30V has 14% chromium, just over the limit, so it is considered stainless. Granted, it's not very far over, so I mean, if you have, a humid environment or acidic hands like I do, you might have some rust issues with it. And then you have other steels like, say, Vanac 75, in the tilt. It has something like 21% chromium, so very high. But the thing is sort of funny, that both Vanac 75 and, say, ZDP 189, they both have over 20% chromium. But the difference between those is ZDP has a lot of carbon in it, and Vanac uses nitrogen as the hardening agent, sort of like H1. The thing with carbon is when you introduce carbon into a steel, one, you have to sort of have carbon to have it be considered steel, first off. But when you do that, carbon is sort of what makes it rust a little bit, That's why you have knives like carbon steel, like 1095. This is basically, let's see, 0.95% carbon, which is fairly high. I think ZDP has something like 3%, which is insanely high. But what happens with ZDP is that all those chromium molecules and atoms and whatnot, what they're doing is instead of being corrosion resistant, they're actually tied up making carbides. They're a carbide former in ZDP. So they're not being used for rust resistance. So even though you'd expect it to have a lot of corrosion resistance, it actually corrodes and rusts fairly easily. But since Vanac here has nitrogen in it instead, it does not rust. It's very rust resistant and very good edge holding. So that's nice. Then you have steels like S35VN. It too, like S30V, I believe has 14% chromium, but one thing that this has that S30V does not have, this has niobium in it, which they dropped the vanadium on this by 1 point, and then they added niobium like 1%. And they claim that that addition, that niobium is a carbide former, and it increases toughness, and it's also, they also say it prevents rust more. I'm not sure about that. This has not rusted on me yet, yay, so that might be true. And then, so really the 13% mark is sort of the threshold. In my experience, anything close on either side will either be semi-corrosion resistant, at least to me, to my acidic hands. And then anything like a carbon steel will rust straight up. But then, steel alone isn't really what's contributing to rust totally. If you have a finish, like say bead blast or stonewash, those sort of tend to open the pores on whatever steel they are applied to, which increases rust, the chance of rust. So if you have a knife that has, say, a mirror polish, even if it is a carbon steel, it'll actually hold off rust pretty well. Because when you high polish something, you're basically closing the pores. You'd have to have really insane conditions to get rust on those, assuming you're, polishing them up and wiping them down. And then the other way you can prevent rust is just apply some oil. That's always helpful. So, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked that request, N8M knife. And thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate the views. Bye.